roughly around $10 million. You exercise the option, and again, the cap is going down for next year, so call that around $22 million, and then you can franchise him the year after. Greeny, it's just what we had talked about a couple years ago with Zeke Elliott, because he was a first-round pick. You have that extra year, so it's roughly about $69 million over 3 years. And Baker Mayfield has a skill set that is replaceable. When you think about guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, those are much harder players to replace. So pay as you go. You don't have to take the risk of the guaranteed money like they did with Carson Wentz and Jared Goff. And if you're Cleveland, if he ever graduates down the road, you could replace his skill set a lot easier than Buffalo ever could with Josh Allen.
All right, I may want to push back on that, but first let me go to Tim and see if he agrees. What do you think, Tim Hasselbeck?
Yeah, I think I generally agree with Mike's premise of having patience with the situation. The thing I would argue against is this. Under Kevin Stefanski's leadership, Baker Mayfield is going to improve. He hasn't been a 4,000-yard passer yet in his career because the situation in Cleveland had been a disaster. Go look at what Kirk Cousins did in Minnesota with Kevin Stefanski there. He's over 4,000 yards. He's somewhere between 26 and 30 touchdowns and 10 or fewer interceptions. He's completing about 70% of his passes. That's what Baker Mayfield can do. So Baker's numbers, like they were this past year, were up from his previous 2 years. They will be up again. He's only going to improve, and then at that point, Baker then becomes more expensive. So I actually think you can argue that you sign Baker now before he's put up numbers that are similar to other guys that are getting these big contracts. Maybe get Baker under a good deal because you feel like you can build around him because of your leadership in the organization.
I understand that completely, but on some level, I feel like you're making Mike's point for him, which is that it's the coach who's really the reason that he's doing that, and if so, then maybe a lot of other players you could put in that same situation and do it.
But Greeny, they would have to be available, and so you're taking the risk that they're available. Maybe the Ryan Tannehill player that you want to release him or replace him with when that time comes because you've delayed it on him, he might not be there, and so that's the risk that you're taking. I'm not disagreeing with Mike that it's a replaceable skill set in comparison to Lamar or Josh Allen, but I would also argue that his skill set as compared to somebody as, say, Kirk Cousins is in fact better. So look, I think that you're hoping that somebody is available to replace him with, and I don't think that that's absolutely a given.
And so Mike T, quickly, just to come back. Go ahead, Mike, go.
Yeah, I made the same mistake with Mark Sanchez. We started off 4 road playoff wins. We gave him a massive extension. It didn't work out. And the inverse of what Tim's saying is...
We know, Mike. We know.
Thanks, Kimberly. Thought we were better teammates than that, huh?
Yeah,
but the other issue is
it was 3
Carson
years,
Wentz.
$40 million, Mike. There's nothing wrong with that now.
Yeah, Tannenbaum was the GM of the Jets, and Kimberly was a beat reporter covering the team for Newsday, and I was just sitting here being miserable about the entire thing, to be honest with you. Kimberly, let me finish it up with you on this, if we could, quickly, because anytime we start going back to the Jets thing, I have to move on. Kimberly, the question is, when should we expect, if there are going to be these conversations with Baker Mayfield and the Browns this offseason, when would they take place?
Yeah, I've asked around, Greeny. Look, around now, combine time is when you would sit down and talk about, both sides would sit down and discuss the timeline. When are we going to come back to the table and really sit down and go over numbers? But the talks don't really heat up until May, the summer. So as far as when we'd actually get deals done, it's a little later. But teams already know heading into free agency and the draft, if this is a guy we want to extend, and they can allocate and set aside, okay, this much money we think will go to that QB.
Yeah, look, they have, because he was a first-round pick, unlike Dak Prescott, for example, who was not. They have another year. They have a 5th year they can play with, plus the franchise tag. It'll be fascinating to see what they do. Speaking of Dak Prescott, this is a very, very big week for his situation as the Cowboys continue to have a huge decision to make. Sign him to a multi-year deal, franchise tag him again. Well, we'll see where the whole thing winds up going. Cowboys legend Drew Pearson offered these words of warning over the weekend.
Where do you go if you don't sign Dak? And if you let him go, and especially if you let him play under the franchise tag this season, and you don't sign him anywhere along the line to a long-term contract, Dak ain't going to be here after that. Dak has a tremendous influence Roger Staubach set the pace for us. That's what Dak's real value is.
Okay, so there's Drew Pearson saying all the things that have been said about Dak repeatedly. So everyone seems to be in agreement on that. Kimberly, tell everybody who doesn't know why this is such an important week for this entire story.
Yeah, the saga's been going on forever, it feels like, Greeny, but tomorrow starts that 15-day period where teams can designate franchise guys and transition guys. So we assume this is likely that the Cowboys are going to franchise Dak for a second year. The difference is now it's going to cost actually more than $37 million with him on the tag.
So, Mike Tannenbaum, again, I come back to you. Take us through the mechanics of this. What will we see when people wake up with us on Get Up one day in the next 2 weeks? What will they see? Will they definitively see Dak Prescott has been offered the franchise tag by the Cowboys? And if so, what does that mean?
Yes, they will designate him as their franchise player starting as early as tomorrow over the next 15 days. And simultaneously, they'll be negotiating a contract. And there is a sense of urgency, Greeny, because, again, the cap is going down because of the pandemic. So if you're Jerry Jones, you want as much room as possible. So you wanted to get him signed anyway, but now you have even more reason to get that cap number down from $37 million, as Kimberly alluded to. So they're going to put the tag on him, and they're going to get in a room with him and his agent and try to get a long-term deal done finally and get this resolved and lower the cap number, which will help them this year.
Well, this would be a very easy process for Jerry Jones if he had the ability to turn the calendar back 2 years. Short of that, I'm not exactly sure how he handles this. Tim Hasselbeck, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. This basically, dragging or this hesitation by the Cowboys has cost them a ton of money. Dak Prescott, had been the biggest bargain in sports. I mean, he really had been. And, back when Jared Goff and Carson Wentz got their deals, it would have been really easy at that point because you had more evidence of the type of player and leader that Dak Prescott was at that point. They should have done the deal then. You could have made the argument it was Goff and Wentz's deal plus $1. Now it's going to be significantly more, and that comes after, he made $31 million a year ago. So, yeah, dragging their feet, they have cost themselves a lot of money, and I think the way that Dak Prescott has handled this gives you even more reason to want to pay the guy because he's been nothing but a true pro.
He has. He's been spectacular, but he has not given anyone any indication, Mike T, that he's going to take anything less than exactly what he wants. And again, there may never have been a player in NFL history who has the leverage he has right now. So how do you expect this to turn out?
Yeah, Greeny, you're making a great point, and leverage can manifest itself a number of ways. It could be total guaranteed dollars, but it could also be the length of the contract, which I think is what he's looking for, where maybe he only signs a 3-year extension and then gets another bite of the apple when the bigger TV deal kicks in, gambling revenue. So he has enormous leverage, years, guarantees, the amount of money. So I think this is going to be a fascinating dynamic, and there's a tremendous sense of urgency if you're the Cowboys. You have 15 days to lower that cap number because, again, with the cap going down, $37 million is going to stop progress from them getting a number of other things they have to get done. So I'm fascinated to see Jerry Jones operate without leverage.
And so, Kimberly, I've been asking this question for 2 years. Is the sense you get from people around the league that they will work out a deal here in time to keep all of that from happening?
Greeny, who knows? Honestly, who knows? Because really the issue was years. Dak wanted less years, and he wants to hit the market again. So will the years be the sticking point again, or will Dak or will the Cowboys concede and say, sure, take 4 years and we're good? At this point, they really need to just get it done.
Ed Werder said on KJZ Radio last week he thinks that what Dak wants is 3 years, $40 million a year. We'll see if that is where the whole thing winds up. We are just getting rolling here as we continue to get up with you this morning. More football. At number 2, that's really where the draft begins. Are the Jets going to take Zach Wilson? And if so, what does that mean for everyone's future? We're talking about it right after this. Get Up on ESPN.